Well, this has been an absolutely crazy week in tech news and a crazy week for me personally, moving 4 U-Haul loads of stuff to this new house. I wonder how it sounds in here compared to my last place I was in, because there's a tile floor in this basement that I'm using as a studio here, and I think I might need to get some rugs down. I don't know. Hopefully I got the volume levels adjusted. This is the first video recorded in my new setup, but I haven't really set everything up yet. But there's so much going on. I want to get a video out here. So you've probably seen that AMD has not canceled their launch, delayed their launch of the Ryzen 9000 series at the same time as Intel has been actually giving a whole bunch more information on what's been causing a 50% failure rate. Except how much information did they actually give us? I've got some more information on that. What about NVIDIA 50 series? And I'm running on very little sleep and a lot of manual labor moving stuff, so buckle up, let's go for the video. So hey, AMD delayed their launch for the 9000 series, but there's already a gaming review out for them right now. Why don't we start with that? So some of the chips did make it into retail channels before they're all being recalled now. And a Italian YouTuber, I guess Sadi Tech, I'm going to attempt to pronounce that, has managed to actually give us a head-to-head gaming benchmark of the Ryzen 9 9900X up against the 7800X 3D. Now, I think it would have been a bit more interesting to see the 8-core part rather than the 9900X being, 12 cores, but on 6 cores on each CCD. I mean, it would have been a little more interesting to see that. But anyway, we do get some gaming benchmarks here. So awesome. Why don't we take a quick look at what we see? So what we're looking at in each chart here, so these are the different, we got the different resolutions and all that. You can see the game up here, tiny text here, like this one's Total War Warhammer 3. And then the color coding here is we've got average FPS in kind of the purpley bluish color. The colors are hard for me. I don't know, man. And then we've got the 1% lows and the 0.1% lows. And then you got the 9900X against the 7800X 3D. Now, for the purposes of CPU benchmarking, you would want to focus in on the 1080p results because you want to remove as much GPU bottleneck as possible in order to see the full potential difference between the CPUs when they're not waiting on the GPU. So if we take a look at that, we can see that in Total War Warhammer 3, the 7800X 3D is a little bit faster. If we move on to City Skylines 2, we see a larger difference between the 7800X 3D and the 9900X. The 1080p results are over here now, but here we're actually seeing differences all the way up to 4K, showing that this game can actually be CPU limited, going all the way up to 4K resolution, it's looking like. But anyway, a larger advantage for the previous generation 7800X 3D in City Skylines 2. As well as Call of Duty Warzone, we're actually seeing things pretty neck and neck, even at 1080p. Not much difference in the averages, although if you look at the 0.1% lows, there's actually a larger advantage for the 7800X 3D, and that's the kind of thing you might notice in a competitive type game, so something to take a look at there. In another competitive game like Counter-Strike 2, we're seeing, again, a noticeable increase in frame rate for the 7800X 3D previous generation part. And again, Cyberpunk 2077, again, a lead for the 7800X 3D, fairly noticeably. And also in Fortnite, a lead for the 7800X 3D. And in Starfield, it's roughly a tie. So then, and then Last of Us Part 1, we see a pretty noticeable lead for the 7800X 3D, and in Alan Wake 2, it's roughly a tie. So it's looking like from those results that we are seeing the 7800X 3D usually at least as good and often better than the newer 9900X. Which is interesting. The WCCF Tech article, I found this information from, kind of summarizes the percentage differences by game here. So you can take a look at that if you're interested. But the point is, at 1080p, we're seeing that the 7800X 3D Okay, so they're listing it as how much slower the 9900X is. So the 9900X is 8.83% slower than the 7800X 3D at 1080p in those tests, which is pretty interesting. And you can see it's kind of summarized game by game here. But okay, so should we trust that the 9900X sample that he got ahead of time is actually representative, given the fact that AMD has delayed the Ryzen 9000 launch? Does that mean that those CPUs were in some way defective and the actual versions should perform better? Now, that's certainly an interesting question. So I went to search for if anybody got a comment from AMD on exactly why these were being recalled. I mean, AMD says this. Here's AMD's quote. They say, "We appreciate the excitement around Ryzen 9000 series processors. During final checks, we found the initial production units that were shipped to our channel partners did not meet our full quality expectations." But notice that's kind of vague, right? Did not meet our full quality expectations. Okay, then it says, "Out of an abundance of caution and to maintain the highest quality experiences for every Ryzen user, we are working with our channel partners to replace the initial production units with fresh units. As a result, there will be a short delay in retail availability." So they're basically saying they're going into their channel, taking out all the stuff they've already shipped out, and then replacing it with new models. So, right, interesting. Why would they be doing that? So again, there'll be short delay in retail availability. The Ryzen 7 9700X and Ryzen 5 9600X processors will now be going on sale on August 8th, and the Ryzen 9 9950X and Ryzen 9 9900X processors will go on sale on August 15th. We pride ourselves in providing high quality experience for every Ryzen user, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so notice that AMD didn't, again, get specific about why exactly they're recalling it. Again, it's just that the ones that were shipped out did not meet full quality expectations. So I was checking if anybody pushed AMD to get more info on that. I'm going to blind you with a white background here, so good luck. Anyway, so at The Verge, they're reporting that this is not because AMD's found any issues with the actual chips. They got a spokesperson, Stacey McDiarmid, I may have mispronounced that, trying my best, telling The Verge that, again, it was no actual issues with the chips. They're saying, rather, AMD discovered some of its chips didn't go through all of the proper testing procedures, and the company wanted to make sure that they do. So that's interesting. So according to what this spokesperson from AMD has told The Verge, whether or not that's all the details, who knows, it's, again, just saying that they didn't go through all of the proper testing procedures. So it's possible that AMD is just out of an abundance of caution, trying to avoid the kind of massive problems that Intel has been dealing with recently by testing their chips extremely thoroughly and making sure that they don't rush products out that weren't thoroughly tested. So that's at least the best info I can find from an AMD source regarding what the issue actually is. So if that's the case, then should we trust the kind of, benchmarks I was showing here earlier? Well, in the end, we'll get full reviews out soon enough, and we can validate those claims. It sounds like there's probably not issues with the chips that were available on the market before this kind of got recalled, but that, they didn't apparently go through the full normal quality testing procedure, so who knows if maybe some duds slipped through the cracks or something that wouldn't otherwise have done so. Now, regarding when will we actually get the full reviews? So it's looking like the Ryzen 9000 reviews will be posted one day before launch. So you will have access to full reviews a day prior to them going on sale, so you should be able to make an informed decision. And I'm glad to see that, because occasionally review embargo date is the same as when products are actually available to buy, which is always annoying, especially if you're worried something will sell out and then do you buy it. So anyway, I'm finding this at videocards.com. By the way, all my sources will, as always, be linked in the video description if you want to follow up on any of these. But it's looking like the embargo dates for reviews are going to be August 7th for the 9700X and 9600X, and then August 14th for the 9900X and 9950X. Again, those being one day before the official launch date where you can go ahead and purchase those. Now, why would AMD be dramatically delaying everything, pulling the initial batch, and trying to make sure everything goes through full quality assurances? Well, could it possibly be to try to avoid something like a 50% failure rate, like what we're seeing another report for what kind of failure rates people are seeing on the 14900K and 13900K. So this source for these Intel stability issues, by failure here, it looks like he just means it's experiencing the instability problems. This is the Unreal Engine Supervisor discloses 50% failure rate with Intel's Core i9 14900K and 13900K CPUs and switches to AMD for reliability. So this is coming from Dylan Brown. So this is not the same Alderon Games report that we've been seeing earlier. It looks like Dylan Brown is Unreal Engine's supervisor at Model Farm. And he's tweeted out that for those curious at work, our failure rate for our 13900K and 14900K machines is about 50% so far. Any new machine builds is going to be 9950Xs. Production environments need reliability. And he says, to be 100% clear, what I mean by failure is exhibiting the widely reported crashes and instability on these CPUs. Then he gives a bit more information, including saying that the 9950X, as they're switching to, has really good single core performance. Anyway, he says that some of the CPUs he had exhibited instability right away, and a few took a bit to start showing up. It's hard to know. And he's saying that all the work that they're doing is Unreal Engine work. So it's looking like, again, another report of a very high failure rate for these Intel CPUs. Now, Intel has, a day or two ago, finally issued a full statement. Sorry for the light screen without the full warning, blinding you here. But so the full statement from Intel now on this whole instability issue, again, doesn't maybe go into as much detail as you would like. So I have tracked down a bit more information. So let's first look at what Intel said, and then let's get into a bit further information on the topic. So Intel's official statement is now, based on extensive analysis of Intel Core 13th and 14th Gen desktop processors returned to us due to instability issues, we've determined that elevated operating voltage is causing instability issues on some 13th and 14th Gen desktop processors. Our analysis of returned processors confirms that the elevated operating voltage is stemming from a microcode algorithm resulting in incorrect voltage requests to the processor. So they're saying it's elevated operating voltage. And Intel is delivering a microcode patch which addresses the root cause of exposure to elevated voltages. And Intel says they are continuing validation to ensure that scenarios of instability reported to Intel regarding its 13th, 14th Gen desktop processor are addressed. Intel is currently targeting mid-August for patch release to partners following full validation. Intel says they're committed to making this right with their customers, but they don't actually say what making it right means. So, yeah, that leaves a bit to be desired. And this post had initially completely ignored the oxidation issues that had been surfaced in a Gamers Nexus video, although they did address that in a Reddit post, saying that we can confirm that the via oxidation manufacturing issue affected some early Intel 13th Gen desktop processors. However, the issue was root caused and addressed with manufacturing improvements and screens in 2023. We've also looked at it from the instability reports on Intel Core 13th Gen desktop processors, and the analysis to date has determined that only a small number of instability reports can be connected to the manufacturing issue. So basically what they're saying is, yes, oxidation was an issue. It did cause problems. They call it a small number, but that's not nothing. And they kind of addressed this separately, so it kind of felt like they were trying to hide this a bit more than just saying that the main issue is in a microcode issue that can be updated. Now, the problem is the chips that have already been damaged due to this. Also, the question is, can we get a bit more information on, elevated operating voltage and what exactly that means? So what I'm at here is Igor's lab post, which is what Intel didn't write on Reddit, but thinks internally. So Igor here is claiming to have internal information shared by Intel, so it's shared internally at Intel that has more details on this, but was not made public. So we have to, in this case, if we're going to go with this, trust that Igor does actually have this documentation and this is accurate, but that is the source of this information. So if you look at this and kind of jump into the more detailed, juicy bits to get some more idea of what is actually happening here, this is, again, apparently the source for this info is internal communication at Intel. So Intel observes a significant increase to the minimum operating voltage, VMIN, across multiple cores on returned affected processors from customers. This increase is similar in outcome to parts subjected to elevated voltage and temperature conditions for reliability testing. Factors contributing to this VMIN increase include elevated voltage, high frequency, and elevated temperature. Even under idle conditions at relatively cool temperatures, sporadic elevated voltages are observed when the processor is resumed from low power states in order to service background operations before entering a low power state again. At a sufficiently high voltage, these short duration events can accumulate over time, contributing to the increase in VMIN. Intel analysis indicates a need to reduce the maximum voltage requested by the processor in order to reduce or eliminate accumulated exposure to voltages which may result in an increase to VMIN. So Igor is now bolding this statement. While Intel has confirmed elevated voltages impact the increase in VMIN, investigation continues in order to fully understand root cause and address other potential aspects of this issue. So the interesting thing here is investigation continues in order to fully understand the root cause and address other potential aspects of this issue, which to me sounds a bit worse compared to what the public statement they're saying, which seems to be indicating, they do say that they're continuing to validate to ensure the scenarios of instability reported, are being addressed. But it had sounded, their post had sounded more confident that they had root caused the issue and that this would for sure solve it. Whereas this statement sounds a bit more concerning, where they're continuing to investigate to fully understand the root cause and address other potential aspects of this issue. So that's interesting. They're also saying that Intel is validating a microcode update to limit the VID request above 1.55 volts as a potential future corrective action targeted for production release in mid-August to NDA customers. So this is telling us what is that microcode update that they're talking about in their public statement. It looks like, again, a limit the VID request above 1.55 volts. Early testing by Intel on a small number of benchmarks indicates minimal performance impact due to this microcode change. Now, I will notice that minimal doesn't mean none. So minimal performance impact. So there could be some performance impact from this microcode change. And to me, that questions, so why the mid-August release date was targeted? Now, possibly they just need that much time to validate this and make sure this is working. But this also is kind of interesting in how it plays into the AMD's Ryzen 9000 series release window. Because if AMD's Ryzen 9000 series was going to release at the end of July, and then Intel has a fix for their issues that could have some performance impact, they're calling it minimal here, but what is minimal? Is it 1%, 5%, 10%? Is it 0.1%? What is a minimal performance impact, right? Because that could show up in reviews if this patch was out in time for those Ryzen 9000 series reviews, right? So that's a bit concerning. Whether they're actually trying to intentionally hide the performance impact by not releasing this patch until a point in August, at which point the Ryzen 9000 reviews would already have taken place. And then that also kind of raises the question of, is AMD trying to play any kind of weird strategic thing to then delay their launches until the microcode updates are out from Intel? In which case, the reduced performance would show up in reviews. But I feel like if that was the case, these may have not been delayed long enough, because if reviews would be out on August 7th and 14th, I mean, it takes a long time to put together all of the testing to get a review out there. So I would imagine that wouldn't actually be enough to make that happen. But yeah, I don't know. Anyway, it all kind of feels really weird right now in the CPU space. That's what I'm saying. A lot of very interesting and questionable, things happening regarding all of this. But anyway, to wrap this up, we'll say that while this microcode update addresses the elevated voltage aspect of this issue, further analysis is required to understand if this proposed mitigation addresses all scenarios. So again, further analysis required to understand if this proposed mitigation addresses all scenarios clashes a bit with, again, Intel's official statement saying that they have that it addresses the root cause of the exposure, right? So the public-facing side sounds a lot more confident than what we're seeing here if we trust this to be internal information from Intel. Anyway, this microcode update, once validated and released, may not address existing systems in the field with instability symptoms. So if your problems already happened, this doesn't sound like it is guaranteed to be a fix for systems that are already having issues. So they do then say systems which continue to exhibit symptoms associated with this issue should have the processor returned to Intel for RMA. So this is interesting because, again, in the public-facing comment, they had just said that Intel is committed to making this right with our customers and asking customers to reach out, but they didn't specifically say what they would do. So it's sounding like this internal suggestion is that for people for whom this microcode patch doesn't fix problems that they're having, that they should return it to Intel for an RMA, and hopefully that actually is the case. Anyway, let's leave that here for all of our talk on CPU instability and delayed launches and all sorts of stuff. But how about a bit more on Intel? So Intel does have an upcoming series of Arrow Lake processors. We'll be interested to see how they perform. Now, the best source for early leaked information on all of this lately has been Jakin on Twitter. And what he has for us now is an Arrow Lake, looks like ES2, so I think that would be an engineering sample, as well as a QS, which I think would be a qualification sample, which should perform closer to the actual launch product, although he specifically also says it's still preliminary and it'll only get better from here, so don't worry about it. And then he is issuing a bunch of synthetic benchmarks along with the scores for the engineering sample, the qualification sample for this unnamed 8-core 16-thread Arrow Lake chip, and then up against a 14900K in the same tests. Now, one helpful thing I found was at videocards.com, they have summarized the percentage differences for, first of all, how the engineering sample, the ES2 sample is doing versus the 14900K, but I think more interestingly, qualification sample versus the 14900K. So it's looking like the qualification sample versus the 14900K is over 6% faster in Crossmark, but is actually 4% slower in WebXPRT4 3.73 Chrome V114, and is 9.4% slower in Speedometer 2.1 Chrome version 114. And it's only about 1% faster in Geekbench 5.4.5 single-threaded, but then is almost 15% faster in Geekbench 5.4.5 multi-core. So it's looking like, if we take these Geekbench results as something to go off of, the single-thread uplift for Arrow Lake may not be very impressive, but the multi-core performance uplift could be more impressive. But again, this is early early results, Anyway, and Cinebench R23 also showing, in this case, almost an 18% uplift, but that would be heavily multi-core. So the average of all of these tests is about a 4.3% uplift, but I think it breaks down to me more looking like the heavily multi-threaded stuff here seems to be getting the more of an uplift, whereas anything more single-thread dominated, it doesn't seem to be that impressive an uplift. The videocards.com article also goes ahead and tracks down some Cinebench R23 numbers that have been leaked for the Ryzen 9950X from a variety of results at a variety of power levels, and shows where this qualification sample falls in between. And it does fall below the highest score we've seen at a 230 watt 9950X, but does fall above a leaked number from the 160 watt 9950X. So anyway, we'll have to see what comes of that. In other Intel news, for their Arc GPUs and their, I guess their Core Ultra H processors that have built-in Arc graphics, and then also their Arc discrete GPUs with 8 gigabytes of memory or more, Intel has released some software called AI Playground. Now, this looks like it's designed to make using certain AI models a lot more simple and user-friendly for people with Arc graphics, which I think is cool. I think more advanced users won't need or maybe even want this type of thing, but to get something kind of simple out there for a lot of people to use with Arc products, I think this actually looks really interesting. I think it's pretty cool. The idea here is that this is a beta project at this point, and it's also open source. And the goal here is to give access to a bunch of different AI models that are easy to use and run locally. And this gives a variety of types, from an AI chatbot as well as I think it also has some image generation with, I think, running off Stable Diffusion. It also looks like it's flexible to install your own models to it. So I think this looks pretty cool, although personally I don't use a lot of the AI generation stuff, so I don't feel like an expert to comment on it in much detail. But if you have Intel Arc graphics, either in your mobile chip or a discrete, maybe take a look at the AI Playground software and see if that's something you'd be interested in. Now, it wouldn't be a PC hardware news roundup if we didn't talk about the latest leaks and rumors for the RTX 50 series. So let's hop into that. The RTX 50 series launch is apparently pushed back to early 2025, according to prominent leaker. However, we'd already had conflicting information on whether it would come end of 2024 or beginning of 2025, so I wouldn't really consider this too much, other than Copite7 Kimmy being the one now saying, I think we won't see RTX 50 until CES. Now, I'm going to say that he's prefacing this with I think, which doesn't sound to me like I have seen this from an official source and this is guaranteed, right? So I wouldn't read too much into this other than someone who is probably somewhat in the know, seems to be leaning towards a 2025 CES launch, but we'll again have to see how these things go. Now, another leak we've been seeing, which is being confirmed by Copite7 Kimmy, is Titan. So apparently, NVIDIA may be working on a new Titan. Now, we had seen rumors that NVIDIA had been working on Titan for the last couple of generations, but then ended up not actually launching it, because a lot of times what they work on behind the scenes and what actually becomes a product people can buy are not the same thing. So, the videocards.com article I'm finding this in is saying that Red Gaming Tech released a video suggesting that there's a new Titan graphics card in the works from NVIDIA. Videocards.com then reached out on Twitter to Copite7 Kimmy, asking, are you familiar with plans for new Titan, or is this just guesswork at this point? And Copite is confirming the big thing exists. Sounds like NVIDIA might indeed be looking at Titan behind the scenes for the 50 series, but whether or not we actually get that as a consumer product is still, I would say, a massive question mark. Another thing we may be getting as a consumer product that seems a bit weird is a new RTX 3050 laptop GPU called RTX 3050A. Now, this isn't actually hitting the market yet, nor has it been officially announced by NVIDIA, But videocards.com is recording that they have found reference to this information in PCID database update, and that this would be interesting because this would be an RTX 3050 on an AD106 GPU die, which is strange because that is not the same generation that we would be usually using for an RTX 3050. And it's also, that would be a pretty big die if it's AD106 to be cut down as far as an RTX 3050, which is pretty crazy. But apparently they also found reference to this SKU in NVIDIA's latest drivers, referencing an RTX 3050A, and did find 2 files referencing it. So this could actually be a thing. And so that would be very different than using GA107, which the RTX 3050s are using, because we'd be moving to AD and we'd be using 106. So that would have to be massively cut down. Maybe this is just something they're doing maybe they just did have a lot of failed AD106 silicon saved up at this point. And it would just had to actually be cut down that far to make sense. So anyway, that's what we're getting out of it. In a few quick announcements at the end, it looks like Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3 is set to arrive on Game Pass later this week, according to Leaker, and apparently Valorant could be getting console versions by July 26th, which would be tomorrow as of the time of filming here on the PS5 and Xbox, so that would be interesting. We're also seeing that Stellar Blade may be making it to PC as supported by a new job listing asking for PC-related development from the publisher. Also, another job listing indicating that DLC could be in the works. We're seeing that Stalker 2 has unfortunately been delayed to November 20th, although hopefully that does mean that we'll get the best possible version of the game. And then as a bit of a follow-up on the blue screen of death day caused by CrowdStrike, apparently the CrowdStrike CEO is being called to testify before Congress after IT outage leads to massive global havoc. So that must be fun for everyone. I hope if your company or you personally were hit by CrowdStrike issues, that has been solved by this point. I know that caused massive headaches for a lot of people. Anyway, I've got to get back to moving even more U-Haul loads of stuff, as well as setting up the things that I actually have here. So again, hopefully this video sounded okay. Like I said, I just started filming, and hopefully I had the microphone and whatnot set up okay. The lighting in here is a lot better because I don't have any of my normal lights set up, but just there's recessed lighting above me in the basement here, and I think it actually hits the green screen really nicely and everything, so that's cool. All right, anyway, I'm going to let you guys go, and I'm going to get back to work. I hope all of you have an excellent day.